So for those who have been hearing my jokes since 1:30, just to introduce myself, my name is Aloysius Cheng. I'm the Managing Director, Asia Pacific for the Cloud Security Alliance, who is running concurrently in this event, the Cloud Security Alliance Asia Pacific Innovation Conference that is happening next door, as well as the pavilion that we ran at the end of this exhibition hall as well. Yesterday we did have a CSO luncheon, the only sit-down luncheon in this event yesterday afternoon. So I guess so far today we have a very fruitful outing, and we're very happy with the kind of ecosystems that the idea have to put together here in Singapore, right? But we have heard about some of the promises brought about by data and data as a service, and we have seen some very practical applications shown to you by Stephen, shown to you by Jeremy, and earlier we also heard about Yuna talking about how we can use the data to help to better guide some of the credit bureau to make the decision. And more importantly is to help the SME manage decision in terms of hiring, what's the right salary to pay. So before we go on, with our usual script of what things that we would like to talk about, I'd like to open to the ground, to the floor, right? To the floor for any other questions that you might have for any one of the speakers here in the panel. So please feel free to shoot your questions right now.
Hi. Yeah, hi, this is John. I have a question for Jeremy. I noticed that your company uses a lot of government data. Are you required to share your revenue with them, or pay for all this information? Because there's a terms and conditions for all this open source data, right? You're not allowed to recreate them in some other portal.
Sorry, yeah. Maybe before Jeremy takes the question, may I know who is speaking and from which organization? Maybe in the future, any questions or proceed with this information so that we can better tailor-make the context of our reply.
Okay. Hi, my name is John. I'm from Tangents.
Okay, it depends on the data source. So we have 30 over data sources, and some of the data sources from the government is free, while others you have to pay a subscription fee, or you have to have a separate arrangement with them. And for a lot of these private data sources, you will have to negotiate on a one-on-one basis on the revenue model. Quite often the case that I learn from experience is that the data itself, especially from the private company, I think Yuna has mentioned some of the difficulties of trying to get the data from the private company, is that they are not that motivated by money. If you think that you can pay them X amount of money to get that information, I think you can be very mistaken, because there is only that much that data is you can sell as a company, because most of the time their revenue model is based on something else. Oh, it just so happened that they have that data, but the difficult part is trying to monetize that data, which is what the government is trying to do. They're trying to set up some sort of like a sharing platform, but even so, it's uphill tasks. And because if it is useful and proprietary, you will probably not want to sell it off at a price that is probably not going to make much of a difference to your bottom line as a private company. So question then is, how do we then manage to integrate with some of these private companies? I cannot divulge too much, but I would say that ultimately every company is motivated by competition. Okay, whatever that means, you have to figure it out, right? Competition is something that you can get people to move. Good ideas don't change people. Competition does. That's it.
Any different spin from the rest of my esteemed panel of speakers? Any other spin?
Yeah, I'll say one thing on private data and getting access to it. Because I come from a position of working with open data, what that represents is a state change from closed to open. But essentially what we're talking about is public data, which can be thought about from the perspective of, does it have a public good? Is there a social value to it? When you think about data from that perspective, then there are lots of data sources for you to tap into. Facebook has allowed individuals to download their social graph It'd be a fairly easy integration to provide a petition system which allows you to pull the social graph from individuals and put that into a data silo, provide analysis, and then provide insights on top of your constituency that's representing a position. There's all sorts of things that you can do once you understand social contracts and people's genuine personal interest in providing social good.
Thank you, Stephen. Does that answer your question, John? Right. Any other questions? I mean, if not, I just throw something out because I thought that it would be interesting, right? Right now we talk about monetizing your data that you have on hand, but are you happy with your data being monetized? Your own private data? Are you happy with that? Maybe we should talk about that, right? Privacy, data privacy, that's a huge topic that's happening right now, especially Europe just throw away the long-established Safe Harbor Act. So is that really a key concern right now for companies like ours, especially SME? They hope to make some money out of data. Anybody want to try that?
Maybe I would try that on the point that, would you like to be able to sell your data? I think the question is that, very likely at this very moment, when you say about would you like to monetize your data, it's about, I think the answer is very likely, especially if you're SME, the answer is no. But I think you could take one step back and say, would you like to be able to say, with the data that you're willing to share, would you help you to do your business better, to go and help you to enlarge and understand how to do your business better and get more sales? Then maybe that is how you can, in a different, indirect way, monetize the data that you're willing to share. So seriously, it's about how could you get SME's mindset to be a little bit more open, more liberal about the confidentiality of your own data. Because the more you close it to heart, you get it close. Don't forget, your data is very little. But what you want to do is to be able to leverage on everybody's little data, put together, and make some meaningful, valuable data to be returned to you. So it is that aspect that how we continue got to be able to educate SMEs. Of course, in my years in DP, this was really one of the very challenging initiatives that we undertook. And we do have managed to get some SMEs who are really, really willing to say, tell me again. It's not about selling my data, it's about me willing to to let go my data, but what do I get back in return? That form of monetization, yeah?
Well, now that Yuna is no longer with DP, I can actually safely say that, maybe a lot of you in this room may heard about this, but there was a huge data breach in US, right? Just last month. And the company that had this data breach is called Experian. Experian owns DP. And if this thing happened in our doorstep, do you think this is something that you'll be very concerned about? Let's say if people look at you, hey John, I know how much you earned last year. I know how much you own each one of this credit card. Do you think is that a big issue? Anyone want to talk about that?
I think this goes back to the point that I made in my talk that data is entropic. It tries to break free. So we do have to be concerned about it, but there's an understanding of the risks and rewards in sharing data. And to talk about monetizing data, money came from a system of promissory notes. I give you something, it's a promise. You can pass that promise on to someone else and trade it for them to provide a service back to you. We think about data, we think about monetizing data, but what we're really talking about is what are we willing to promise people in return for that data, as individuals or as in a society. And I think it comes back to government, it comes back to governance, it comes back to civil society. We need the data. We need to solve big problems in the world. We need to solve some very big problems, and we need to do it relatively quickly. So privacy will get thrown out the window if we can't quickly come to terms with managing the governance around data.
Thanks, Stephen. So anyway, assuming that the data protection at that and PDBC in Singapore actually take care of all this information, let's assuming that we could actually make use of data and monetize that. And so how?
If I may add
Yeah,
to the point, I think when you have data theft, it's just about, I mean, it's a theft, right? Of course, definitely it's about governance, it's about how do you protect, it's a security. And the question is, there's a lot more within that when you put data together. The more you put together, the more you link, definitely there is that degree of risk. And it's what Stephen says, it's really a risk-reward equation that you would ask yourself, all right? You can just say, I don't trust credit cards because all those things are in the air, and I want to pay everything by cash. So it's a decision that one could decide to take for himself. But let's really work towards that, not for the fear of something that will go wrong. What we want to look out as to what all the whole ecosystem will try to put forward to safeguard this. And as you say, all the governance and the acts has helped to protect, all right, on some of these privacy of data.
Well put, Yuna. So assuming that PDBC take care of all these teething issues, right? So right now we have open data that we can use, and we can also purchase some data for our usage. Assuming that we have all these things right now, we can monetize it. And given the fact that we are on the Smart Nation initiative and then the talk of IoT, so anybody have any vision how we're going to bring all these things together? We talk about a mesh. We keep on talking about mesh of data. So how do we going to harness this mesh of data under the Smart Nation initiative, given the fact that IoT right now is at our doorstep? Anyone?
Sure. We need linked data. So we need Web 3.0. Linked data stores data in triples, and basically it solves a whole bunch of problems. We have issues around data breaches because we have data silos. We have issues around data access because we don't have a good credentialing system and the pass-through of those credentials in a revocable way. Linked data does actually provide solutions around that, so we need to take the academic work of the W3C and actually bring it into products, procedures. But more importantly, we need policy to mature around it as well. For those who don't understand linked data, look it up. There's lots of really cool videos, and it's a very neat thing.
Yeah. Are you having that in your company, providing this information, this kind of interaction of data?
Well, actually, I'm incubating a linked data company at the moment around the issue of credentials. So it is in my mind at the moment. And for those who are interested, I mean, it's just this simple concept. You can have a credit card, and traditionally you use your credit card to verify your identity on a website to some extent, and also to learn, that website can then learn things like how old you are, and it will then give you access to something. But fundamentally, you don't need to know the birth date of someone to know how old they are. You just need to ask the question, is this person over 16, or is this person over 42? And a credentialing linked data system basically answers those questions. You authorize the linked data custodian, the knowledge bank, to provide the answer to those who are accredited with requesting it.
Great stuff, Stephen. So, about you, Jeremy, anything on street scene side that you are thinking of harnessing the power of data, as well as data that you may gather from IoT devices in making your services even more powerful to the user?
Yeah, there are certainly a lot of opportunities from all the various data sources. But one of the things that, I mean, we are a big beneficiary of data.gov.sg over time because of the opening up of more data, and it allows us to do a lot more things. But I think there's one important aspect that the government can play a bigger role in. As Yuna has also mentioned in a slide, there is this portion of trying to desensitize the information or trying to anonymize the data, right? Because there's a lot of very useful information that's out there that when released on its own, without anonymization, it becomes very sensitive. Like, for example, the bank records, bank records, the loan records. and even property information, property data, who is buying. So these are very useful information. But if they are not anonymized, they cannot be combined or they won't be released. So let me tell you what I mean. So we know that what is really sensitive is the identification number of an individual, right? Because you don't want to be able to uniquely identify this person. It has taken this particular loan, has bought this particular property at this point. But whether he bought the property or whether he took a loan, they are all sitting, the data is sitting in silos in the different organizations. Is it with the bank or is it with the real estate agencies? And in other examples, it can be sitting elsewhere. So what is common throughout the different silo databases is this identification number. Identification number. If we share the data as it is without anonymization, it's not going to happen because of the sensitivity. But yet we want that so that we can cross and see what happens to an individual. Not necessarily we need to identify that individual, but what happens to the individual when he's taking a loan. We can cross-study it when he buys a property. Is there any correlation with non-performing loans and so forth? So you need data from different sources. And but you need to anonymize the NRIC number, right, the identification number. But in order to anonymize it, you also need to be able to link one data set to another data set to know that this particular anonymized data is equivalent to that particular anonymized data. So that requires someone at the central to be managing to do the anonymization, somebody that's trusted. So that's probably where the government can come in a little bit more. So for example, if the government sets up a anonymization unit, so what this anonymization unit does is that if I am a private sector, I have concerns about the privacy of my information, I can send this data to the government unit. He will anonymize all the NRIC numbers, right, the identification numbers to some lookup numbers, such that there is a common standard when another organization send me again another data, but this time maybe banking data information, but the NRIC number is mapped to the same set of numbers that you can cross the two data sets, yet you cannot identify the individual.
So right now in theory, you can actually use the data on hand to do some very bad things, right?
Right, but you will need a neutral organization to be able to farm out and standardize these numbers.
Right, so we're talking about the dark side of data. So in a highly regulated industry, so how this thing can be addressed? Do you have any idea how this thing was done in the past when you were VP?
No, I think this is really something that if you're talking about the future further lift off, taking for what Jeremy has said, seriously, especially people like in DP, we are very, very concerned about how data is protected. So that is what is our kind of stand to all our customers. But exactly that is what personally, into the years in DP, where we have many exchanges of government and the ministries, that was exactly something that was trying to explain to the agency to create something what Jeremy was saying, because people who, like us as serious data service providers who are collating data, you really understand the need to be able to index and link. And when you link need with the exact ID, exact house, exact, there's a lot of unique exact things you need to link. But yet at the same time, we just couldn't cooperate with each other because you will be about linking it to mesh into a bigger multi-set information. And nobody is willing to be able to share that because a lot of private confidential data will be released. But we need a neutral entity whom we can trust, and definitely we will look towards Singapore government as being able to become that so-called, what I was putting in my slide but not clear, as a special federated search, whereby then, but not exactly in the way Jeremy put it, but just to be able to say at the point when a new use requires out of this, and you need to pull from multiple sources data to do a selection criteria, how each different service providers are willing to trust this neutral government agency to throw all the confidential data there with the correct identity so that you could link, get out the mashed up data, drop away all the confidential information, and come back with a record sets that is very useful for use, and it no longer will also compromise on any what we call business or individual confidential data.
Thank you. So I think what in essence what we have been talking about is the need for some kind of technology that can do this, and this actually is here already. It's called digital reduction. So they help with anonymizing certain information that you want to hide from the PVI, like your name, your email. And that technology right now, in fact, in the Cloud Security Alliance, we actually use digital reduction to anonymize data collected so that this data could be analyzed in the cloud instance sharing platform that we are building right now in response to the second cybersecurity executive order as issued by President Obama of the USA. So that is something that the CSA has already a product that is working, and it's actually being used by the banks and the government agencies in US that make use of that for data sharing. So force all the cloud service providers to share information that subscribe to this, and then once they share information, the information is digitally reducted. So in the interest of time, I'm so sorry that we have to end the discussion right now because the other speakers for the other time slot have entered. So for any other further queries and discussion, feel free to approach any one of the speakers, anyone on this panel, and I have to thank you for your time with us. Have a nice day ahead.